While you should design to the size of the package, you must also consider the bleed area. Now, this is an area that's slightly larger than the die cut of the package. It is there to help compensate for any shift of the package stock during the die cutting process. Now, each type of printing requires a different amount of bleed, but how you create that bleed in your Illustrator document is the same. So let's create a bleed area for both our label and our carton. I'm going to begin with the label. So I'll go over here to my Artboards panel, double click on Artboard number 2, and that will reveal my label die line. So how big should the bleed area be? Well, for each printer, as I said, it's going to be a little different, so be sure to confirm how much bleed you need on your document. A standard size for label printing is about 1/16 of an inch, so that's what I'm going to use here. Now, taking the information that I already have about my label size, I'll just increase that by 1/16 of an inch on all 4 sides of my label. But before I do that, I'm going to create a bleed layer. So I'm going to come up here to my Layers panel, and I'm just going to create a new bleed layer that will live up above the die line layer for now. I'm going to rename that layer, and now I'm ready to start drawing my bleed area. So once again, I'm going to rely on my rectangle tool. Even though the die line for the label has rounded corners, the bleed area really doesn't matter. It can remain as straight corners. So I am going to simply click here to the upper left of my die line, and I'm going to enter the width and the height for my bleed area. So the original die line was 7.5 inches wide. I want to add to that 1/16 of an inch on either side. So that's actually going to be 1/8 of an inch. 2/16 equal 1/8. For the height, I'm going to do the same. The original size was 2 1/4 plus 1/8 of an inch. And I'll tell this OK. So this should be my bleed area, but as you can see, it's not aligning to my die line. So let's line this up. First, I'm going to remove the fill color. So here at the bottom of the Tools panel, I'm just going to remove that fill color. And then I'll use the regular selection tool. The bleed area is selected, so I'm just going to hold the Shift key and select the die line itself. I'm going to release the Shift key, and then I'm going to click once more on the die line. And you'll notice that the die line lights up a little bit bolder. This is now the key object that is selected. And now I can use my Align panel over here to align to that key object. Now, I want to confirm that it is going to align to the key object, so I'm going to go to the Align panel menu here and Show Options, and make sure that Align To has the little key icon. Perfect. Now I'll choose to align horizontal centers and vertical centers. And I can close my Align panel. I'm going to deselect them all. And so here is my little bleed area. Now, to help me distinguish my die line from my bleed area, I might want to discolor one of those. So I'm actually going to select the die line in this case, and I want to make sure that it has no fill, and then perhaps the stroke color could be something like a vibrant green or a magenta, something that you normally would not use in your document will be perfect. And I'll deselect. Okay, so you can see that a label bleed is not that difficult to create. But what about our carton? Well, that's going to take a little more work. So let's take a visit over to our Artboards panel, and I'm going to double click on the carton artboard. Okay, so for the carton, the bleed area is not going to be so simple because we have the various little dips and turns here for the various little panels and flaps here that are going to have to be cut out. So for this one, I'm actually going to use my die line structure to create my bleed area. I'm going to create a nice consistent, about 1/8 of an inch bleed all the way around these panels. To do this, I am going to select all of the die line panels for my carton die here, and I'm going to just duplicate them. So over here in my layers panel, I still have that bleed layer, so I'm going to duplicate these and put them on that bleed layer. I'll go up to my edit menu, and I am going to copy these. I'll go back to the edit menu. I'm going to paste them in front. And then over here in the layers panel, because they're still selected, I have this little indicator that these panels are selected. I'll just drag that indicator up to the bleed layer. There we have it. Now I'm going to go ahead and lock my die line layer so I don't inadvertently move those panels around. All right, now let's go ahead and let's deselect this little glue tab here. We don't really need this. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click on it, and that will deselect that object. Now I still have all the other panels selected. All right, we need to merge these elements together into one single cohesive shape. And so one of my new favorite tools inside of Illustrator is this little shape builder tool. And with this little guy, I can start merging my panels together. So I'm just going to drag from panel to panel, and you're going to see this little texture area pop up. When I release the mouse, those elements are now one single rectangle. Now I'm going to continue this process and drag across to add those panels. And I'm going to drag across to add these. And I'm going to drag down to add these. And I just continue this process until I have all of the shapes that I need. Now you may end up with some little oddities in here. Maybe some things didn't fit exactly right. Not a huge deal here because the next operation is actually going to get rid of those. So I'm going to go over to the regular selection tool. And now I'm going to go up to the object menu. I'm going to go down to the path, and then I'm going to choose this feature here, offset path. I simply enter the amount that I want. In this case, I want about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to type in 1/8 of an inch. Now I don't have to double this up like I did the label because Illustrator is going to expand this in all directions on all sides by this value. I tell it OK. And now you can see this larger outline shape. The inner shape is still here. It still keeps the original. So I'm going to select that and delete it. I'm also going to select this little glue tab out here and delete it. So next I need to remove the fill color here. And now we can see our original die line underneath. And there's still a little extra piece here. I can see that showing up. So I'm going to just select it and delete it as well. It looks like there might be a couple of them here. So I'm just going to get rid of any of these little extraneous pieces that are not needed. And just like I did with the label, I'm going to change the color of my die line here. So I'm back over to the layers panel. I'm going to lock the bleed layer, unlock my die line layer. And by locking the bleed layer, I can just click and drag over the entire area and know that I'm just going to select the die line. I'll make sure there's no fill, and I'm going to make sure that the stroke is some different color. A little later on, we might get a little more specific about the color of the die line, but for now, I just need something to help me differentiate it from the rest of my artwork. I'll deselect, and there we have it. Establishing the bleed area of any printed piece is important to the look of the final product. Using the die line as a basis, it is relatively quick and easy to define a bleed area. Now later, I will demonstrate how to use the bleed area I just established to give my design proofs a more professional look and save the printer some time as well.